Okay, I'm going to go through these chronological and parenthetical sections pretty quickly, and I think you guys are going to get it just fine. I encourage you, I wrote some of these different sections down in my Bible just so that when I'm going through the book of Revelation, I can track with what's happening in the storyline, and I found it really helpful. But chronological section number 1. This coincides with Revelation chapter 6, and these are the seal judgments. And what we see happen in Revelation 6 is that scroll that Jesus took out of the Father's hand, he starts opening or loosening the seals that were on it. There were 7 seals on this scroll, and each seal is a judgment on the earth. And you can just read that as you go through, but Revelation chapter 6 is Jesus opening each one of those seals and enacting his battle plan on the earth. Now, John starts seeing these judgments that are taking place on the earth and some pretty intense things that are happening. And we go to this first parenthetical section, which talks about protection for the church. So John might raise the question, what's happening at this time to Israel? What's happening? Are we undergoing these judgments? Are we, participating in some of this stuff? Because we see that there is persecution and there is martyrdom that's happening. But Revelation chapter 7, or this first parenthetical section, talks about protection, that the people of God, or the saints, are actually sealed. And we know that there's a sealing of 144,000 from the different tribes of Israel that take place. And we also see a great multitude before the throne of God. So the angel's telling John, there's protection in the midst of these judgments that are happening on the earth. Okay, chronological section number 2. This part is Revelation 8 and 9, and this talks about the trumpet judgments. And we see these angels get given these trumpets that they blow, and as each trumpet is blown, another judgment is released on the earth. Jesus' battle plan being released. And specifically, these judgments are targeted against the Antichrist and against his army and his following. And as these judgments are being released, we can count them. Okay, trumpet number 1 has been blown. Trumpet number 5 has been blown. And one of the most exciting, incredible moments of human history that has yet to take place is when that final, or that 7th trumpet is blown. Because we know from Paul in Thessalonians that at the sounding of the last trumpet is when Jesus is going to split the sky. We're going to be raised to meet him in the air, and at the twinkling of an eye, we're going to be changed into our resurrected bodies. And Jesus begins his procession around the earth, for every eye to see him, until he makes his way into Jerusalem. And I'm kind of skipping ahead, but the 7th trumpet is going to be the most exciting and incredible moment of human history, as our long-awaited hope is finally seen with our own eyes. But of course, again, John sees what's going on as these trumpets are being blown, and the intensity of the judgments that are being poured out on the earth and poured out against the Antichrist kingdom. And he, puts that pause button on again, and we go into the second parenthetical section, which is direction. We see that there is direction for the church at that time in the form of prophecy, in the form of the 2 witnesses that are on the earth, that are going to be 2 literal prophets in Jerusalem that have the ability to perform incredible signs and wonders like Elijah did, like Moses did. And there's going to be prophetic direction for the church, for Israel, in the midst of these last days. It's a time of actually great hope and of great unity between heaven and earth, as we hear and as we are just seeing heaven open in positive ways, and for the wicked in negative ways. But there's going to be an incredible open heavens in that day with direction for the church. As that pause button comes off, we go to chronological section number 3. And I kind of skipped ahead of myself earlier, but chronological section 3 coincides with Revelation chapter 11, starting at verse 15. And this is the seventh trumpet. This is when Jesus splits the sky and returns to the earth, and we meet him in the kingdoms, begin to be transitioned under his leadership, the kingdoms of the earth, and he makes his procession around the earth for every eye to see him. It's going to be an incredible and exciting moment. Now, after that seventh trumpet is blown, we go again into a parenthetical section, or a pause on the storyline. And we see why Jesus' return is so intense, because what's happening on the earth at that time in Revelation 12 to 14 is we see Satan's rage against Israel. We see his rage against saints and believers all over the earth, to the point where Revelation 12 actually says that he's thrown out of heaven and thrown to the earth. All right, that's pretty intense, but there's a lot of good happening in the midst of it too, because it says that the church overcomes by the blood of the Lamb, the word of her testimony, that she didn't love her life unto death. So there's a lot of positive happening. But then also in Revelation 13, we see the Antichrist and the false prophet and this statue, and just a lot of intense things that are happening in that time. And we understand that the levels of darkness, the levels of sin in these events that are taking place are so intense that it also gives a lot of understanding to us of why Jesus' judgments against the Antichrist and against wickedness and sin are so intense, because the levels of darkness demand that level of justice. So this parenthetical section is about confrontation, that there is a real just cause and reason for the intensity of the judgments against the Antichrist and his kingdom. All right, chronological section number 4, these are the bowl judgments. This is the last set of judgments that are against the Antichrist, his kingdom, and his army. And these bowl judgments are going to completely shatter the Antichrist kingdom and his power just before Jesus returns. The fourth parenthetical section coincides with Revelation 17 and 18, and this is where we see about the harlot Babylon. Now, the harlot Babylon, it's not that confusing, but it's actually going to be a real city, a real resurrected city of Babylon that's going to be the center for commerce, for trade, for immorality and sin and darkness on the earth at this time when all this stuff is taking place. And we see in Revelation 17 and 18 the seduction of Babylon towards the rest of the earth, the way that she seduces the kings of the earth, and she seduces just the people, every tribe on the earth. But also we see her judgment, that she's given time for a little while to seduce the earth, but there is a time appointed for her judgment. Ready for the last section? Chronological section number 5 is Jesus's triumphal entry. And this part is incredible, because after Jesus makes his procession around the earth, where every eye sees him, every tongue confesses that he's Lord, saying, "It's been you, Jesus, all along." He makes his way, he touches down to the earth, and he makes his way into Jerusalem, where the Antichrist is waiting with his armies to make battle against Jesus. And we see that there's no competition. Jesus is able to destroy those armies with the sword of his mouth, and we see the Antichrist is bound, and Jesus gains the victory. So this is chronological section number 5, which coincides with Revelation 19 and 20. And then the last parenthetical section, the end of the book, Revelation 21 and 22, we see the restoration of all things. That God's original design for the earth is restored to Garden of Eden-like settings. And that Jesus begins what's called the millennial kingdom, or his 1,000-year reign on the earth, in which the earth is going to be rebuilt and repaired and ready for when the Father comes down with the New Jerusalem, with a physical city. He's going to come down and dwell here on the earth. And it's the restoration of all things, the end of suffering, the end of sin, the end of tears. No more crying, no more pain. And this is the book of Revelation. So I hope you're able to follow along, to use this structure as you go and study the Bible. It will be a great help to you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next video.